Good afternoon. I'm Carolyn Lowell. I'm the Chief Content Officer at OrthoWorld, and I am honored to welcome you to our session today. Infection prevention is the next big step in orthopedic devices. Today you're going to hear the why and how companies are prioritizing infection prevention in their product development initiatives. Let me introduce our speakers. Our moderator is Gautam Gupta, who serves as the Chief Commercial and Portfolio Officer for Orthopedics at Elos MedTech. He previously held significant leadership roles at 3D Systems, including Senior Vice President for the Global Medical Devices and Dental Business. Gautam also worked at Biomet and was responsible for the invention and commercialization of the OsseoTi porous metal technology. With a strong background in P&L management, strategic vision, and team leadership, he has successfully overseen international teams and multi-million-dollar operations across various organizations. Dr. Stephen Gatellis is a highly regarded expert in the area of orthopedic oncology and limb reconstruction and currently serves as the director of the Rush Center for Limb Preservation. His numerous appointments also include Endowed Chair, Rush Medical College Professor of Orthopedic Oncology, and Director Section of Orthopedic Oncology, Rush Presbyterian St. Luke's Medical Center. His early orthopedic oncology experience came from fellowships at the prestigious Rizzoli Institute and Mayo Clinic. Jean Kulesha is Executive Director, Advanced Technologies at Oncosurgical, and a proven medical device technology leader who excels in research, development, regulatory approval, and scaling of antibacterial and additive manufacturing technologies through product commercialization. His experience extends into global regulatory approvals, in vivo preclinical research, quality assurance, and production scale-up. Gene translates technologies into products that bring commercial success to companies, and he is skilled in technology development, product launch program leadership, design for manufacturability, and regulatory approvals. And Devendra Gore is a research manager at Zimmer Biomet and part of the company's anti-infective technologies and innovative solutions group. He focuses on evaluating new technologies in this space and taking them from concept to commercialization. Devendra has extensive experience in research, regulatory, manufacturing, and quality functions. His more than 20 years of experience in the medical device industry includes project management, material and product testing, antimicrobial testing, coating development, corrosion testing, process development, and risk management. Please join me in welcoming our panel.
Okay, so I'll get right into it. First, I'd like to thank Omtech for organizing such an amazing show for a day and a half. So much packed in it, and the show is really doing well. So I appreciate Omtech giving us this opportunity to talk to you guys. Second, I wanted to thank our panelists. They've taken time out of their schedule and all to come here and talk about this important development that is happening in the industry that sometimes doesn't get enough attention. Third, I want to say biggest thanks to you guys for showing up and, from your break, from your work at the show, at the booth, to come listen to this. I hope I can keep the conversation interesting and we will all learn a little bit from the conversation from these guys. I will leave 10 minutes at the end for questions, and Nancy, thank you. Nancy will have a mic and she can bring it to you guys so you can ask the questions we want. Okay, so I'll get right into it. The four pillars, the way I've thought about it is we'll have four pillars of discussion for the panel. One will be the clinical need, to just understand why a technology like what we will discuss today is needed. Second, some more details of the technology itself, which the OEM, the Oncos and Zimmer Biomet representatives will talk about. Third, for me, one of the very difficult things is how do you scale an operations for a technology like that? So we'll talk a little bit about that. Hopefully the guys can share some of their experience. And fourth is regulatory process and strategies for something like this. They've both done it successfully. So we just love to know a little bit more about it. Hopefully that sounds good and interesting. Those 4 pillars is around where the conversation we will try to have. So Dr. Gitelis, I'll start right with you. We've all been associated with the industry and have learned about, this is a prevalent problem for infection in joint replacement, whether it's primary, revision, etc., goes exponentially with oncology cases, etc. You've done it for a while. Could you talk to us about why having a technology and a solution for this field is important, and what are the different solutions you have used over the years to do infection prevention?
Well, thank you for that. Let me start out by welcoming you all to Chicago. This is my hometown. I've been at Rush downtown for 50 years and no plans to retire. I am an active cancer surgeon. I did a big cancer limb salvage yesterday, and I continue to enjoy that very, very much. What's our greatest fear as an orthopedic surgeon, other surgeons as well? Infection. And any way we can address infection prevention is hugely valuable. Again, it's a nightmare for us to deal with a patient who has an infected implant. Starting with just simple total hip, total knee, the incidence about 1, maybe 2%. It's still a big problem. The outcomes of a simple total knee, 98%. If they get infected, that number drops down to 70%. And it's still a decent number, but not what our patients expect with a standard total knee. It takes 1 or 2 operations, a lot of antibiotics, a lot of healthcare costs. So it's a really daunting challenge. In the oncology world where I live, it's a bigger challenge because I have to deal with a patient who's missing 8 inches of his femur and joint. And if it gets infected and I have to do a 2-stage revision, I have to take everything out, somehow manage the patient for 6-8 weeks while they get their antibiotics, and then go back in and put a new implant. And that's very difficult to manage a patient with a skeletal defect that large. The incidence of infection in oncology, somewhere around 25%. It's a real big problem. And the risk is not only a lot of healthcare costs, the risk is actually amputation. You asked me about what do we do. Most orthopedic surgeons know what we should do to mitigate the risk of infection. It's not completely effective. That's how we're still seeing infection numbers. Laminar airflow, I wear a spacesuit. We control traffic. They get perioperative antibiotics, ultraviolet light. I think the speed of the operation is critically important. We use betadine lavage and other forms of lavage. So even with all those techniques to mitigate the risk of infection, we still see it.
Okay. So clearly a big problem. Industry has been trying to solve it for a while. I would say with limited success, things come up. What I found interesting when I was thinking about the panel for today was 2 different ends of the spectrum, with Oncos as a startup who's scaling up now, and Zimmer Biomet at the, as one of the largest orthopedic device companies. Amazing to see both are interested in applications for anti-infective, and both had some clearances in recent time, right? So I thought it was very fascinating that we are getting some traction in this. Could you talk to us, Gene, maybe first you can go, about what is your technology? How are these solutions different than what Dr. Gitelis has been talking about and we have seen being used in the industry?
Sure. Thank you, Gautam. And thanks, Omtech. Wonderful to be here. Great to see the conference grow to the levels that it has. It's just a pleasure to observe that. So our company, Oncos Surgical, we're about 10 years old now. We're focused exclusively on revision surgery, revision implants, instruments, as well as oncology. That's really where we're focused. And those are the cases where basically there is the greatest clinical challenges. Dr. Gitelis said up to 25% infection rates in oncology, revision infection rates about 10%. Our technology, which we got a de novo authorization on about 2 years ago, is called Nanocept. The technology itself is a coating that we apply, a coating of a compound called methacrylyl oxydual-decylpyridinium bromide, MDPB for short. It comes from the family of compounds called quaternary ammoniums. And what we've done is we've developed a process where we are able to covalently and permanently bond it to our metal implants. So this is a non-eluting coating, and what the coating basically does is it kills bacteria on contact in the operating room during the time of surgery prior to implantation. So what we feel is that if we can reduce the number of contaminants, bacteria, and what have you on the implant before it gets implanted, that might have significant clinical benefits down the road. So I think where Dr. Gitelis and the orthopedic community drops off or stops is they try to maintain as much as they can a sterile environment within the operating room, but there is always going to be some pathogens that are going to find their way to an implant or to an instrument, and that's where we feel that we step in as a device company, create a coating which is going to kill these pathogens before they find their way in vivo into the body and then start causing more downstream issues for the patients and for the clinical community. We've recently got a 510K following up on our de novo approval back in October, and we just got our second 510K clearance yesterday on our titanium product. Originally, a lot of our focus was on cobalt chromium. Now we've been able to switch over and get clearances on, get a clearance on our titanium components, which we'll be commercializing shortly. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Gene. Devendra, you want to talk about some of the efforts Zimmer Biomet has done in anti-infective technology?
Yeah, so again, thank you very much for inviting us on this panel here. It's great to be here. And as Dr. Gitelis said, like infection was like a very neglected topic for last several years. When I remember 10, 12 years ago, like when I started working in this field, people at our company like Zimmer Biomet used to say these people probably don't have anything meaningful to do, that's why they're working on these antibacterial or anti-infective type of stuff. And now fast forward 10, 12 years, everybody talks about infection. And I think the overall, we should be thankful to the community as such, the surgeons, the companies, the regulatory bodies, they're all now coming together to identify that this is a real problem, this is a big problem. Some of the surgeons that we talk to, they'd say this is the one thing that keep them awake at the night, the infection. And so there are a lot of different ways you could approach this problem. I think the ONCOS has done a certain approach, and Zimmer Biomet has a different type of approach. And so as you heard, the Zimmer Biomet's technology that we're working on, specifically the iodine technology that I'm going to talk about, is more like an eluting technology. So what it means is the iodine that we put on our devices that comes off of the device. And so that's the difference. There are eluting technologies, non-eluting technologies. So iodine falls into the eluting technologies. And the way we put this is a surface modification, this technology is. And so you are modifying the surface, you're creating a porous oxide layer onto the surface of the implants, and then you're incorporating the very well known, the betadine it's a very well known antiseptic that everybody uses, everybody is familiar with. We use the same betadine solution to incorporate into our devices. And then over a period of time, it comes off, it kills the bacteria, kills the fungi, so there is a broad spectrum efficacy for iodine technology, iodine. The other technology that Zimmer Biomet also, this is more specific to the European market, what we call is Bactiguard, and that's more into the non-eluting platform. And so that is more like a noble metal coating that prevents the bacterial adhesion to the surface of the device. And so that is right now already approved in the European market, and the iodine technology is approved in the Japanese market so far right now.
Thanks, Devendra. Again, very fascinating, Dr. Gitelis. I'll come back to you. Pumping antibiotics in the body, we know it only has limited effect at the site at which the infection is happening, and it's more preventative to some extent. We are now talking about localizing the solution, right, through either surface modifications with iodine or other modifications that are more permanent instead of eluting. Any thoughts from your side? I would think it should as you think about OR and as you think about the implant integrating as a part of recovery, how that changes the paradigm of anti-infective thought process for preventing the infection in the first place?
What, excuse me, I've learned, which was surprising to me, maybe to you all, is the operating room is not a sterile environment. There are circulating bacteria that attach to particles, and there's some beautiful video of these particles attached and floating around the operating room. I wasn't aware of that. And these particles are what can contaminate an implant prior to implantation. And again, that was a surprise to me. So any technique that can address that, protect the device, even before I put it in a patient, is highly desirable. And the other thing I want to mention, despite these diverse technologies, I believe in combining them. Pants over vest. Maybe it should be some iodine based, maybe some quaternary ammonium, maybe a combination thereof. The more, the better. But you just have to present to orthopedic surgeons convincing evidence. You just can't say my product is perfect. Well, it's great. What evidence do you have, I would ask? And there's not going to be a lot of prospective clinical trials when it comes to infection. They're too difficult to do. So you have to present to us all the preclinical evidence that you've acquired in developing your technology. So I would add, I would answer the question that way.
When you guys were going through your journey, could you talk before, and I'm going into the operations and scaling of it, but before you hit the jackpot and you're like, okay, this is how, I want to freeze this process. I was aware a little bit of the journey Onkos took, as well as Devendra. I was there 12 years ago with you. Yes. I wasn't the one saying that you're wasting your time, but obviously there is always skepticism about the impact of the work and how long it would take. Just curious if you could talk about how was the journey, how were the setbacks, and what did you guys think from a strategy point of view, from an investment point of view, like Dr. Catella said, from evidence generation point of view, to get to a place where you felt, okay, I can put it in front of an FDA, I can put it in front of the regulatory bodies and say, I have something special and different here?
Yeah, I think a critical, I'll go first. I don't know if you want Devendra to go first, but I think the first critical step is to make sure that your management team, your investors, your backers are behind this, and they need to support you, because they need to understand that it can become quite a turbulent road in terms of getting approval, scaling it up, getting the data, understanding the testing, making sure you're doing it the right way. That's the first thing. I think you've got to have a leadership team that absolutely believes in it and realizes that it is more of a long-term play. This is not a 510K. You're not going to get a clearance within 6 months or a year. That might even take a couple of years. It took us 5 years to get that de novo across the finish line from day one. I think the other thing is just some self-awareness. I think every company has to have a level of humility and understand that we're device people. Devendra and I were just talking that we're both material scientists, metallurgists. Now you're doing biology, I'm doing organic chemistry. So if you don't have the right team, you've got to build up the right team and realize that now you're kind of entering this world it's not pharmaceutical, but it's more pharmaceutical-like. So you've got to have the right people signed up early on and initially. If you don't have the right people, or if you can't hire them for whatever reason, I think it's important to bring on the right advisors, both obviously regulatory, legal, technical as well. I think that's a key thing. I think you've just got to be humble and realize that this is a new area that you don't know. This is an area that doesn't have 100% clarity from various regulatory agencies as well. And you've got to kind of gird yourself and prepare for what can be a bit of a rough ride. But ultimately, I think if one sticks with it, if a company doesn't give up, keeps on generating data, good data, shares that with the regulatory bodies, builds up a team that can answer the hard questions from regulatory bodies, I think ultimately you'll get to a point of success.
Thank you. Devendra?
Yeah, and cannot agree with you more, so when I look at my journey, our Zimmer Biomet journey over the last several years, this is the thing, we had so many starts and stops, people have second thoughts. Like is this the right technology? Do we want to invest in? What is the how long it's gonna take? And sometimes like some of these executives at these big companies, their tenure is like short, as compared to like people like us, and so like they're always looking at from their side, like is this worth investing? How long it's gonna take? And the other thing that I would like to say, is like bring is the regulatory aspect of this. So as a Zimmer Biomet, like big company, like a lot of like smaller companies, startups, they come to us. They tell us like, hey, we have like this cool technology, this new thing. Can you like help us? Can you like can you work with us? Type of stuff, right? And so when you look at that stuff, you first question you have to ask is like, what is the regulatory path? How am I gonna get this across the finish line? And so that's when like when you have like so many like different choices, then you have to focus on like as you said, like the right people, right expertise in your company, and so then you start looking at these different technologies, start zooming in, and then figure out like which is the better, what is makes most sense to you, and then you start putting a lot of efforts into developing those technologies, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's important the point you made. Sometimes people are thinking, what's my 5-year strategy plan? Well, sometimes it takes more than 5 years. So how do you put any revenues over 5 years of investments into a plan and then present it to a board or to investors to say for 5 years I'll be pumping in millions of dollars in resources and you won't see a penny? And it's hugely high risk. I think in pharmaceutical, people are more attuned to that kind of risk and reward, but in our industry, that's kind of very difficult to get people on board and keep them excited after a few failures, right? So it's interesting to talk about that perspective as well. I'm curious, Dr. Katelis, and I shared some thoughts before I came here. I see we have some time, so I'm taking you a little in new space, but it's all connected. When a med device company thinks about an innovative technology, and we say, okay, it's a 5-year span, and you are busy with treating applications, even though you have a vision for, say, 5 years later, it would be awesome to have something like this. But for next 5 years, I'm going to have to Frankenstein this a little bit. How does a surgeon get involved in the process of research to make sure it's getting consistent, regular feedback so that the journey is as efficient as it possibly can be? It's still going to take 5 years, and it's a huge commitment. But if they sign you on as a consultant for a design, it's different than a design of an implant. But how does an orthopedic surgeon get involved in the process to help the med device companies be more efficient with the process?
When I started at Rush, in 1972, our chair was George Galante, who was a visionary in development, largely with Zimmer, maybe others, I'm not sure. And he sat me down and he said, it's critically important that I devote at least one day a week in our laboratory. He had a wonderful laboratory at Rush to translational research. So in that laboratory, I had the great opportunity to work with scientists like you to help guide me. I'm not a scientist, but they have the knowledge base that's so critically important to success. Now, and if you're asking me if I know something's going to take 5 years, well, I'm 75. I don't know that that's important to me right now. I would like it to be sooner, but what I want it to be as an orthopedic surgeon is it proven safety, efficacy, and cost. And if you present something to me and it shows me good, strong evidence, whether it's preclinical or clinical, like I said, clinical evidence is tough. Prospective randomized trials are tough. But if you can present to me good evidence, I should say, you have me. Then I'm keenly interested, and I'll do anything and I can to help bring it to the finish line.
Perfect. So now say we have gone through the design iterations and experimentation, now we are at a place where we are ready to submit to the regulatory bodies. We have convinced the board that this is now the best thing. Everybody's on board. And suddenly you get indications from the FDA or the other bodies that we may actually be okay with the data you have presented. And now the challenge is, how do you operationalize it? How do you scale it? Where do you do it? Which, like, does it have to be localized to the countries in which you are setting it, or can it be done like from a central location? Could you talk to us about some of the thought process of how to think through that? How did you guys decide that? And what's the process like to scale it up? And maybe, Gene, this time I'll go to Devendra first.
Sure.
And you can do, because I'm curious, when you talk about Japan, we are in the US, that global aspect of the technology comes into play. And it's not something that you have to do in the OR, right? It can be done at a manufacturing facility and then distributed around. So I'm curious how you guys are thinking about it and how you guys have invested in scaling the technology.
Yeah, so you need to have the right partners, like when you like trying to scale up. And for our iodine technology, we're fortunate to have a good partners with us, working with us. And so when I like just give you like idea like how this whole journey is, so whenever you're working on like certain like new technologies, right? You always have to look at like you have to always, even though you are a researcher, right? And I'm a research engineer, right? But I have to still think about like, how am I gonna manufacture this? How easy and difficult it is? Is it gonna fit into our quality system? Like all these companies, like, we are medical device companies, right? So we are highly regulated. We have our own quality systems. And so how you have to think about all these big picture things, like when you're evaluating like these technologies. And so once you dial down, like, so I'll just give an example. Like, so when we were working on this technology, we started in a lab, right? You start with like small coupons and small things, figure out like what the process parameters, like how they're going to affect like overall the outcome of the process. Then you want to actually go to the next step, as like a pilot production setup. So from lab scale to like a pilot production setup, where then you actually start looking at the real implants. So it is one thing, to have a good process and good process parameters and things like that for small coupons. But there's a big learning curve, when you go from a coupon to a real implant. And so you have to figure out like those things, so I will say like, think about like those, like have a pilot production setup. And once you like try the process on real implants, and like again you will learn, like there may be some changes that you will have to apply, you will have to do, going from a coupon to the real implant. And then the next stage is the actual production. There is always a big gap between like, so when we do things in the lab, like you're working with like engineers and scientists, right? But when you think about like the actual manufacturing floor, the skill levels, the actual educational background is way different than somebody working in the lab. So you have to like make your manufacturing process, design the manufacturing process in a way that it is like very simple and easy to do, like from the operator standpoint. And so that is again another like a learning curve, going from pilot production to the real manufacturing. And that's where you need to have like good partners that they can work with you, have a good collaboration to bring these technologies to the real world, to the market.
Gene?
Yeah, I would echo that. I think one of the challenges that we have, well, maybe this isn't a challenge; it's a bit of an advantage. Are the number of procedures that companies like Onco's services are relatively small. Thank God, there's not that many orthopedic oncology cases, so our numbers are relatively small. But as we start scaling it, we also have to tap into outside experts to guide us and help us. But I think the important thing is, if at all possible, just keep building your internal team, and your leadership team has to understand that we have to make the right investment now. We're orthopedic companies who are now investing in organic chemists. in people that are experts in surface sciences and cationic surfaces. These are words that were never uttered in our world. We were metal and plastic people, and now we're kind of shifting gears and going into a different world. I mean, I've been very lucky in my career. I started in manufacturing, I went into product development, ended at research and development, and now I kind of got into the regulatory field, but now I'm getting back into scaling up this process, and I'm kind of bringing some of my previous knowledge to bear. And frankly, that did our ability to, when we chose this technology, chose to go after it, we did assess its manufacturability, and we realized, okay, this is manufacturable. There will be some challenges, but if you can't make this thing in large volumes and put products in trucks and ship it, then it's not going to be commercially viable for us. So, yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
Let me touch on the regulatory aspect of it. Not trying to make us experts here, but probably one of the most challenging aspects of bringing this to life is the regulatory part of it, apart from doing the research. Just curious, you guys adopted a very different approach. Devendra, Zimmer Biomet is obviously leveraging its historical knowledge and how to bring products to market. Just curious if you guys could talk about the regulatory journey and share some advice or insights with the audience about if somebody here is trying to start a new company or invest in one, which is focused on surface modified anti-infective technologies, what should they be thinking about the regulatory journey?
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, please.
So we started the journey about 5 years ago, and it was challenging at first because I think even the FDA was a little bit uncertain about our technology. Are we a drug or are we a device? And we got clarity on that. Dr. Gatellis was involved with us from day one. Again, we had the best advisors, the best chief medical officer coming in, meeting with the FDA. We met with the FDA face-to-face probably half a dozen times, over phone calls, maybe short of 100 times. So it was constant interaction, which was very, very helpful. I think the FDA is really faced with a very daunting challenge. They are given a package of data. In our case, we had tens of thousands of pages of data, and they've got 3 to 6 months to make a decision on it. They've got to get educated, they've got to learn about it, and they've got to make a decision based on statutory timelines. So I think it's important to organize the data, make sure it's presented clearly so FDA is able to digest it. I think it's also important to make sure that a company knows what its claim language is going to be, what your labeling is going to be, and that your data supports that, very, very efficiently and very, very effectively. And again, they're in defense of the FDA, they're in a tough position because if they approve a technology that goes wrong in the marketplace, they get in trouble. They get hauled up in front of Congress. If they're not approving technologies, they get hauled up by certain Congress members as well. So they're really caught between a rock and a hard place. So they were our customer, they were our partner, they worked very, very well with us, very efficiently. We had great reviewers, we had a good relationship with them, and we got fair treatment. It was still a very long journey, it was very arduous. We did probably about 20 times more testing than what's typically done for a regular 510K submission. So that's kind of where it was. I think the important thing to remember is that you really do need to work with them. I'm stating the obvious. Obviously, you have to work with them. But if you've got the right people and the right advisors and the humility and the patience that just keep at it, not give up, stand behind the data. You have to believe in what you have, obviously, first and foremost. But if you could stand behind the data, show that a product is safe and efficacious, it will eventually lead to an approval or a clearance. Because the FDA understands that there is a clinical issue out there, and it's got to be resolved, and it's been going on. This clinical issue has been a challenge for many, many decades, and frankly, it could be fatal in certain cases. So there have to be solutions that start getting commercialized by the marketplace.
Just quick, Gene, if you could, like MDR and all those European changes in the last 4 or 5 years have been such a burden on new way of doing things, right? That's the law. Any thoughts on how, all the answers were very focused on the FDA, obviously that's where, you guys have taken the journey. Any thoughts of how we can navigate that path?
I think the important thing with MDR, as I understand it, so I've been really focused on the US market. Onkos is pretty much a US focused market. We've got some presence in Europe. But as long as we start collecting the clinical data to demonstrate safety, we'll be able to get it through Europe eventually. But we're starting that journey right now. We are doing a post-market surveillance. We are collecting data from about 7 or 8 different sites. I believe it's about 100 plus patients that will be keeping an eye on it. And then eventually we'll be able to use that to go into Europe. But that does remain, I imagine, a daunting challenge from what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing. So,
Okay. Devendra, you guys started very differently, started on the other side of the world, and now coming towards US, I hope at some point. Any inputs on your regulatory strategy and pathway?
Yeah, I mean, like we had certain reasons, like why we started in Japan, because the technology has its origin in Japan, and so the Japanese FDA, or what we call PMDA, they were aware of like this technology. So obviously, that's why we started in Japan. But even then, I think to Gene's point, the important thing is to engage with the regulatory agencies at early stage. Get them like familiarized with your technology, with your data. I think our experience in our journey has been like very collaborative with whether it is PMDA or with the FDA. They also understand there is a need for these technologies, and they are trying to help you get these technologies to the market. So obviously they have to have this fine balance between the safety and efficacy and all that stuff. And then so you have to just have a lot of patience dealing with this, and I think the sooner you start, the better it is. I think that's what we are also learning as we go along, the experience with the Japan and experience with the FDA as well.
Okay,
So,
thank
yeah.
you. Dr. Katelis, last word to you about what do you think about the future of this, and then we'll open up for questions.
I'd like to start out by offering my kudos to the scientists at Oncos. I would listen to their discussions as they went through this 5-year process with the FDA, and they would make a presentation, and the FDA would come back with more questions. And then they would have to answer those questions, and then they come back with more. So at the end of the day, they had to do 60 experiments to satisfy the FDA, ultimately to get their de novo approval. Some of those experiments were not ASTM. Their scientists, biologists, whatever, had to invent them and convince the FDA that they're valid. And I just was so impressed how they came up with these experiments to satisfy the FDA. No, anything that can lower the risk of infection, we as orthopedic surgeons will be keenly interested in, for the reasons I started out. Infection in our world is awful. It's awful for our patients. That's who we worry most about. What they have to go through to try to solve this problem is extensive and painful and costly and not always successful. So if we can come up with anything from any company that will lower that risk, I'm in favor.
Thank you, guys. I'll open it up for questions. We have about 6 minutes or so there is time for a couple in.
Really nice discussion, everyone. James Wernley from Zimmer Biomet.
You may have to speak up, James.
James Wernley from Zimmer Biomet. Really nice discussion. I enjoyed it. I am curious. We have preclinical data. We're getting FDA approval. We're getting approval in Japan. So what is the next step to convince surgeons, to convince payers that these are the right technologies, and new technologies that come in, they are the right technologies? What are those next steps to provide the proof to start using them?
I didn't hear a word he said.
Dr. Katelis.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. Maybe
I think the question was around what are the next steps after the technologies are approved? Who does one have to convince? The surgeons, the payers, et cetera?
in my opinion, you need a surgeon champion. We have them at Rush, and some of them work with your company, who you know. I think you could develop product internally with your brilliant scientists, but I think it's really useful to have a surgeon who can take that knowledge and kind of disseminate it in various forums. So I would encourage you to link with some surgeon in your area. You probably already do. I think that's important.
I think, James, none of us here have solved the code for how to get paid for it. Otherwise, that's an ongoing challenge, and especially for a technology that is so new. I don't know, maybe Oncos has cracked that code.
I don't know if we've cracked it, but I mean, I think it's such a clinical challenge that many hospital systems and surgeons are welcoming anything that will make a meaningful difference or that has a chance of solving this. Really, it's just a horrific clinical problem. Again, especially, in the revision space and the oncology space, it's a big, big problem. So people are consuming it for sure.
Yeah, I just want to make one comment. When I was the chief of surgery at Rush, I was the chair of the technology oversight committee. Surgeons prior to that would just, a company would say, I got this better mousetrap, and bring it in. And then that doesn't work. So we created a system of scoring submissions in terms of safety, efficacy, and cost. So any surgeon who wants to introduce a technology, at least at Rush, probably at most hospitals in the country, you have to present that type of evidence. We score it and either accept it, do it provisionally, or reject it. And I think that's what you're going to be facing in the future.
Okay. Well, if no more questions, I'd like to thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you.
It was
Thank
a good
you, sir.
discussion. Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank you.
it.
Thanks very much.